Welcome to our deep dive into the life and legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales. We've got some excerpts from a biography that we're going to be looking at today. And before we jump in, I'm curious, when you hear the name Diana, Princess of Wales, what's your immediate reaction? Is it the people's princess, a fashion icon, or maybe the tragic figure?
Well, it's interesting you say that because the source actually starts with her aristocratic upbringing,
Oh, really?
which is kind of a contrast to the people's princess image that a lot of people have of her.
That is interesting. So she wasn't always sort of the champion of the people.
Right, exactly.
That's fascinating. So tell me a little bit about her childhood.
Well, she grew up at Park House.
Mm.
It was on the Queen Sandringham estate. So she was actually playing with Prince Andrew and Edward as a young girl.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, can you imagine growing up playing with royalty and yet knowing that your path was going to be very different from theirs?
Right, and the source really delves into some of the family dynamics, too.
Mm.
Her birth actually followed the loss of a male heir in the Spencer family, which put a lot of pressure on her parents' marriage. And Diana later reflected that that strain was probably a big factor in their eventual divorce when she was just 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, it does make you wonder how much that early experience with family turmoil and kind of the societal expectations, how much that might have shaped her outlook later on.
Yeah, it's certainly food for thought. And it seems like even her schooling kind of points to this idea of her forging her own path. The source mentions that she wasn't particularly academically inclined. She actually failed her O levels twice, but she excelled in music, the piano especially, and she loved to dance.
Yeah. She definitely had talents and interests that kind of went beyond the traditional expectations for somebody in her social standing, almost as if she was already kind of like pushing back against some of those norms even then.
Hmm. Okay, so let's fast forward now. It's 1981, and we find Diana working as a nursery school teacher's assistant. She's engaged to Prince Charles and about to step onto the world stage. Their wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral was watched by a global audience of 750 million people.
It's mind-boggling to
Right.
think about that kind of transition for a 20-year-old.
Sure.
Stepping into a role with that much scrutiny and expectation must have been incredibly daunting. The source even mentions that at the altar, Diana accidentally reversed the order of Charles's first two names.
Oh my gosh.
Like she got flustered and mixed them up.
That's human.
Yeah, just a little reminder that even amidst all that pomp and circumstance, she was still human.
So from a fairy tale wedding, we quickly move to motherhood. William arrives in 1982, followed by Harry in 1984. And this is where the source reveals something quite significant. It talks about Diana's struggle with postpartum depression, which was a topic that wasn't really openly discussed at the time.
It really highlights how she was ahead of her time in many ways,
Right.
particularly when it came to raising awareness about mental health. She wasn't afraid to show that vulnerability, and I think that that really resonated with people.
It certainly makes her more relatable. Now, the source also delves into her approach to raising William and Harry. It seems she was determined to give them a more normal upbringing than was typical for royal children. She was involved in choosing their schools, their clothes, and she even insisted on taking them to school herself whenever possible. Do you think this was her way of rebelling against tradition, or was it something deeper, a desire to kind of shield her sons from the intensity of the royal bubble?
I think it was probably a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a sense that she wanted to break free from the constraints of royal protocol, but you can also see a mother's love and that protectiveness at play. She wanted her sons to experience life outside of that gilded cage.
Right. Unfortunately, as the boys were growing up, the cracks in Charles and Diana's marriage became impossible to ignore. The source doesn't shy away from the infidelity on both sides. We see Charles resuming his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles and Diana having an affair with James Hewitt, the family's writing instructor.
And all of this is happening under the intense scrutiny of the media.
Yeah.
I mean, the source even mentions how some tabloids went so far as to question the paternity of Harry based on his resemblance to Hewitt, which was later disproven. But, it shows the level of scrutiny and intrusion that Diana was facing. Can you imagine living under that kind of microscope?
It's almost like her personal life became public property, dissected and analyzed by the whole world.
Exactly.
No wonder she sought solace in her work with charities. It's like she really found her voice and purpose there.
She did, and it's fascinating to see how she channeled all of that attention into something positive.
Hmm.
The source describes how she initially struggled with the pressure of being the Princess of Wales. But by the mid-'80s, she really starts to blossom through her charity work.
And she wasn't just a figurehead lending her name to causes. She was deeply involved. Hands-on even. The source highlights her work with AIDS patients and those with leprosy. And remember, this was at a time when the fear and stigma surrounding these illnesses were rampant.
And that's what's so powerful about her actions. She didn't hesitate to hug and touch these patients, showing the world that compassion could overcome that fear.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the impact of seeing those images.
Yeah.
A princess embracing those who had been ostracized.
It's pretty powerful stuff. She was willing to challenge the status quo and really put a human face on issues that many people just preferred to ignore. And she didn't stop there. The source mentions her walk through a live minefield in Angola.
Incredibly brave.
Right.
To bring attention to the issue.
So we've seen Diana navigating the complexities of royal life, motherhood, public scrutiny. But by 1992, the facade of that fairy tale marriage was really crumbling. Charles and Diana separated, leading to a very public and messy divorce in 1996.
And it was during this time that Diana gave that bombshell interview for the BBC's Panorama program. Her words, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. I mean, they sent shockwaves through the monarchy and really captivated the world."
The source also mentions a detail that I found a little unsettling. Apparently, Diana's brother later claimed that she was tricked into giving that interview, like through forged documents.
It makes you wonder about the lengths that some people were willing to go to get their story. That ethical line, where is it?
It definitely raises questions about, the media's pursuit of Diana, this constant push and pull between her desire for privacy and the public's appetite for every detail of her life.
A theme that's still relevant today.
Right, and even after the divorce, the scrutiny didn't let up. The source explains how she lost the style, Her Royal Highness, although reportedly the Queen wanted her to keep it. But Charles insisted that she be stripped of the title.
It's interesting, though, because even without that formal title, she remained incredibly influential.
Yeah.
She had transcended the confines of the monarchy and become a global icon in her own right.
She was Diana, Princess of Wales, but she was also just Diana, a woman trying to figure out life, love, and loss in a very public way.
Absolutely. Navigating that path in front of the whole world.
Picking up where we left off, the source portrays Diana kind of stepping out from the shadow of the monarchy and into a new chapter of her life. It seems like she was searching for something more, a sense of fulfillment and peace that maybe royal life just hadn't provided.
Yeah, and the source actually dives into her relationship with heart surgeon Hasnat Khan. And this wasn't just a fling. Many considered him to be the love of her life.
Oh, wow. So this wasn't just a tabloid romance.
Not at all. This was much deeper,
Yeah.
but very different from her marriage to Charles.
In what way?
Well, Khan was very private, and the whole relationship was shrouded in secrecy. Diana went to great lengths to protect him from the media.
That's interesting. Even with all her fame, she still craved that sense of normalcy in her personal life.
It seems that way. But the source hints that the pressure of their different worlds and the constant media attention,
Yeah.
it just became too much.
And they eventually split.
Yeah, sadly they did.
The source mentions that Diana was really heartbroken by the breakup, but she didn't stay single for very long. She soon began a relationship with Dodi Fayed, the son of Egyptian businessman Mohammed Al-Fayed.
And that was a very public relationship, very different from the one with Khan.
Totally opposite.
Right.
Dodi was known for being, flamboyant and extravagant.
Right, the opposite of Khan.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder what drew her to each of them.
it really does. What was she looking for in those final years?
It's hard to say for sure. The sources don't give a clear answer, but they offer glimpses into a woman who was in transition. Still committed to her charity work, but also exploring new possibilities, new connections. Almost like she was trying to figure out who Diana was outside of being a royal.
Makes sense. Tragically, that journey was cut short. August 31st, 1997. Diana and Dodi Fayed were killed in a car crash in Paris while being chased by paparazzi.
It was a shock to the whole world.
It really was. The source goes into some detail about the crash. The driver, Henri Paul, was intoxicated and speeding. There were a lot of conspiracy theories floating around.
And the paparazzi were heavily scrutinized for their role in the events of that night. I mean, they were aggressively chasing Diana's car.
And the official inquest in 2008 ruled it an unlawful killing. The driver's negligence and the actions of the paparazzi were both cited.
Right. But the questions and alternative theories, they still linger.
It's like we can't let go of the mystery, the what-ifs.
I think it speaks to how Diana's life and death became intertwined with our own emotions. She represented something more than just a princess. For many, she symbolized hope and compassion, a reminder of how fragile life can be.
The source describes the immediate aftermath, the frantic attempts to save her life, the somber announcements. It's a stark reminder of how media coverage can shape our understanding of events.
And in the midst of it all, the outpouring of grief was incredible. People from all walks of life leaving flowers and candles and messages outside Kensington Palace.
A spontaneous and heartfelt tribute. Just people trying to find a way to say goodbye.
And the funeral became this global event, watched by billions, a shared experience of mourning for a woman who had transcended national boundaries.
And amidst all the solemnity, there was Elton John's performance of Candle in the Wind, 1997, just so poignant and heartbreaking.
Her brother, Charles Spencer, gave a powerful eulogy, too. He celebrated her life, but also criticized the media for their relentless hounding of Diana.
It was a reminder of the dark side of fame.
Definitely. The royal family also came under fire. Many saw their response as being cold and distant.
There is a real tension between tradition and the public's outpouring of emotion.
The monarchy seemed out of touch. Diana represented a more modern world, and they were struggling to adapt.
Diana was laid to rest at Althorpe, the Spencer family estate. But her story didn't end there. Her legacy lives on, so we've really gone through it all, haven't we? From her childhood, her marriage, that charity work, and then, of course, her tragic death. And now I want to talk about her legacy. Why is it that even now, decades later, she's still such a captivating figure?
Well, there are a lot of reasons, I think.
Hmm.
One of the biggest is that she really redefined what it meant to be a royal.
Yeah.
She brought this more modern, compassionate approach.
She really did. She wasn't afraid to break down those barriers, hugging AIDS patients walking through a minefield. It showed the world that royalty could be both glamorous and human.
And her influence on the monarchy is still felt today. Look at how William and Harry interact with the public. Their openness about mental health, their dedication to charity. It's a reflection of the path that Diana paved.
She humanized the monarchy, made it more relatable. And she did it all while dealing with intense media scrutiny and that very public divorce.
She was incredibly strong and resilient. And you can't forget about her fashion sense. She was a true icon.
Oh, absolutely. A trendsetter.
Yeah, she effortlessly blended that royal elegance with a more modern personal touch. The revenge dress, those off-the-shoulder gowns, even her casual looks. It all made headlines and influenced fashion globally.
And then there was the jewelry, that sapphire engagement ring.
Oh yeah, now worn by Kate. It's one of the most recognizable pieces in the world. A real tangible link to Diana's memory.
Speaking of her impact, we have to talk about her charity work.
Of course. The Diana Princess of Wales Memorial Fund has raised millions for the causes she cared about. Landmine eradication, HIV/AIDS support. And her sons have continued her work with their focus on mental health and veterans.
It's incredible to see how one person's dedication can create such a ripple effect. Diana may be gone, but her spirit, her compassion, her willingness to challenge the status quo, it lives on and inspires people everywhere.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So as we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's worth asking ourselves, how will history remember Diana, Princess of Wales? And what can we learn from her life and her death? About empathy, compassion, and the power of using your platform for good.
Such important questions to consider. And on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive into the life and legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.